You know those moments early on in a survival horror game when you have 2 pistol rounds and are afraid to go into the next room for what might be lurking there? When you feel like you're barely scraping by with ammo, healing items, and the like? What if a survival horror game was able to maintain that feeling for the entire game? By keeping tabs on how a player uses ammo and even how good they are at hitting their target, the game could alter what it gives the player and keep every encounter fresh and intense. This smart manipulation of the player through their own item usage is what we're going to be exploring today in this first ever episode of Game Design Brainstorm. Ben here, and welcome to Game Design Brainstorm, a new monthly series I'm starting where I pick a game and or mechanic and talk about why I like it, dislike it, and how it could be changed to be better or at least more fun for me, and hopefully you too. And if you know anything about me, you know I'm a huge fan of the survival horror genre, and more specifically, the Resident Evil series. One of my favorite parts of most of those games is the first couple of hours where you have only a pistol and a handful of bullets and are left to wander in a location, find what you can, and really hoard and conserve every little thing. Moments where you have 9 bullets and know you can take out the zombie at the end of the hallway, but what about the next room that has 2 zombies in it? Can you get around them? That's the crux of the early hours of Resident Evil games, and I love it. A similar structure can be seen in games like BioShock, where you literally start the game with nothing and slowly build yourself up. But I've always found the early parts of those games to be diametrically opposed to how they feel at the end. You start RE1 as Jill with 15 pistol rounds, and by the end of the game, you have a full arsenal. Don't get me wrong, it's cool and I love taking out crazy mutant enemies at the end, but the whole basis for the game began as you struggling to get by, picking up 3 shotgun shells and feeling relief. That's completely out the window by the end of every Resident Evil game, and not to mention BioShock, where you end up as John Wick with all the X-Men powers. Going through an RE game a second time has you even more stacked with firepower. In part, that's why I love the last third of Resident Evil 7 on the boat so much, because it has the audacity, when you have several different weapons, healing tonics, and other items, to take it all away and dial the setup back to 0. You have nothing and are filled with anxiety as to where to go and what to do, just like you were at the very beginning of the game. Then, of course, you get everything back and murder a bunch of monsters, but at least it tried something different. Even the brand new remake of Resident Evil 2 suffers this problem, despite the suspenseful horror-filled opening half. By the end of my Claire B run, I had piles of ammo for every weapon. It didn't make the game less fun, but it certainly didn't match the feeling of the opening hours. But could it have? Let's not belabor the point anymore. Time to dive right into what I think could be done to ensure we get both big, bombastic boss encounters in these games, but also ammo and item scarcity throughout. And all through some smart behind-the-scenes math. While I'm sure there have been games that do similar things to what I'm proposing here, I'm not aware of everything, and to my knowledge, no game has done explicitly what I'm proposing. I know Left 4 Dead follows some of these ideas, Dead Space as well, even Resident Evil itself. My primary focus with this idea is for a game like Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, 7, RE2 Remake, etc. And for that, we should look a bit more on some examples of what those games have already done. Throughout the Resident Evil series' long life, you pick up a lot of items. It could be a note giving backstory, a key, or, for our interests, a healing herb or a few shells of ammo. There are set spawns for items, meaning that those items will always be there until you pick them up no matter what, and they will never change. In the early games, enemies don't drop anything when defeated. This means that the number of enemies is a known quantity, and so is the amount of ammo given. So why do you end up with so much by the end? Well, probably because you're saving it, conserving it for later, but there never comes a time when you'll actually use all of it, and thus the surplus and the endgame shotgun spree that inevitably happens. Every entry since Resident Evil 4 has had destructible barrels and boxes that give the player an item. The vast majority of these items are not set in stone, but rather personalized to something the player statistically needs more of at the time. Also, starting with 4 and continuing through 6, enemies drop items when defeated. I did a small experiment and tested out a few barrels in the room right after the village in RE4 with the following subsets of items in my inventory. A normal inventory featuring a pistol, shotgun, and some healing items, no healing items, one with just a shotgun, one with just a pistol, and one with no ammo whatsoever at all, even throughout the guns. Some items remained the same, no matter what I had, and those were removed from the results. And the results are actually about what you'd expect. With no healing, I got more money, and random enemy drops with healing. With only the pistol, I only got pistol ammo, and the reverse with the shotgun. With no ammo, I got the most ammo out of any setup. However, it's hardly what I'd call tailored. The enemy drops were the most random and the most likely to help the player out. This makes a lot of sense, and it not only feels nice to get something for defeating an enemy, but the designer can regulate what the player has more easily. If they don't have healing items, they are much more likely to get them from enemies. If you don't have a shotgun, you're less likely to receive ammo for it. Makes sense. But Resident Evil 4 is more of an action game, and ammo scarcity isn't exactly the thing it's going for, but you can see the opposite effect, where it doesn't want the player to have too much either. Capcom and others have clearly been doing things like this for years, but I want to take it a step further. I'm not saying ending the game as a badass action star is a bad thing, but rather that I think it would be cool and super compelling to play a survival horror game where not only that didn't happen, but that the experience was more on the fly tailored to your playstyle. What exactly am I talking about? Well, the following might get a little nerdy with a lot of unnecessary numbers, so just bear with me. Normal ammo and health item distribution is much too high in these games, and that is on purpose to ensure players can get through them without completely running out of ammo and having to restart the entire game, because that would not be fun. However, through gameplay you can glean a lot of useful data about the player and use that to both feed them more of what they need and withhold any extras. For this hypothetical example, the game is tracking all sorts of things, weapon accuracy in general and on a per weapon basis. It is also looking into the most common shot locations, the head, the body, the arm, etc. Is the player carrying very little ammo, barely any ammo, a ton of ammo, for which weapons? We also want to look at how frequently this player heals. Is it only when near death, or whenever damaged at all, however slightly? Even the amount of healing items themselves, and if they are possibly being hoarded. From all these metrics, and probably many more, we can start to tailor the game in a certain way to manipulate the player. Get headshots 9 out of 10 times? You get less ammo. And what if zombies started tilting or moving their heads or stumbling more because of this? Or if the game replaced certain enemies with ones that didn't have a head as a weakness? What if you miss a lot of headshots or use a lot of ammo per enemy? The game could give you more ammo, or more shotgun ammo over pistol ammo. Is the player relying on one weapon too much? Cut the ammo back for that weapon and switch it to a different one to encourage or even force players to mix it up. Additionally, in many cases, the amount of enemies in a given area is not going to change. There are 3 in this room, 2 in the office, 1 in the hallway, so on. The ammo drops would be calculated based upon the personalized, estimated amount of bullets required to take out everything. And as an aside, you can't just shoot a wall and make things easier. The game will count it as bad accuracy only if shots are taken near an enemy. Manipulation would still be possible, but it would really only happen with the hardcore and speedrunning types, and I think that's perfectly okay. They enjoy manipulating systems anyway. On the healing side of things, yet to be discovered herbs could change red to green or green to red based on the player's current state and stockpile. The delicate balance will be the aim for players to never have too much, same as with ammo. The main goal is to avoid the endgame scenario where the protagonist could start a small war based entirely from what was in their pockets. Through these and many more smart adjustments, the conservation mindset these games start with will continue through to the end. But Ben, what about bosses? Well, here's where things get even more interesting. What if a boss's health wasn't a static number? What if it wasn't even tied to an HP value, but instead to how much ammo the game wanted the player to be left with when the fight was over? 2 players enter a boss fight, one with 50 ammo and one with 10 to represent the 2 different ends of the spectrum. Additionally, in the boss arena, there's 20 ammo for the first player and 5 for the other. The player with 15 ammo total is scared and scrambling to make this work. The boss is stronger than default and faster, with time between attacks reduced significantly. It's a harrowing encounter, but one that is decided when the player shoots the boss only 7 times. But remember, that's half of all their ammo. The player with 70 total has a much different time and a longer fight. The boss for them is slower moving, pauses to eerily stare at the player, and does much less damage than default. In the end, it is the same with this player leaving with 20 ammo remaining. Since they had so much to start with, they have a longer way to go to win the fight. The idea behind all this is to drag both players, the ammo conservative and the gun is blazing, back into a place where they both must worry and think about ammo and if they should attack, run, sneak, etc. through the next enemy encounters. Additionally, it allows the game to have unique and memorable fights which are a staple of the series. And the movement speed and damage value changes I mentioned are key to it as well to make both players feel like it was a fair fight and neither was a pushover or egregious. After the boss, ammo and health drops are adjusted based upon the player's state as well as how many enemies are in the next area, leading to something that balances the experience out. The system can even adjust to players getting better at the game's mechanics, which is also a cause of the end game ammo surplus in Resident Evil games. There's so much more that can be done to somewhat simply tailor the experience to each and every player. It wouldn't be perfect, and numbers should be skewed to favor the player having more rather than less, at least on normal difficulty. But it would certainly make for repeat playthroughs being just as tense and exciting as the first run, especially if random modifiers were added to the playthrough to periodically change ammo types to encourage different weapons. You know there's a hallway of lickers coming up? Too bad all you have is machine gun ammo. I hope you have a good plan. So why is it Resident Evil games so consistently end with so much extra ammo? Is it simply a balance equation done intentionally so that the latter half can have more action and bosses? Is there a game that already has a system similar to what I've outlined? Please tell me, because I would love to play it. If there are any questions, comments, suggestions, please let me know and I'll address them in either the next video or a little update on the side. Thanks for watching. Brainstorm over. I got to go back and play some more Resident Evil 2. That game is really, really good.